Thank you, Gord. As most of you probably are aware, or as some of you remember, last year we had a fairly intense January General where we had different people come in and talk about anti-racism at more of an academic point. And one of the most important pieces of feedback that I thought we got was that there wasn't enough room for people to talk at the meeting and to hear from each other and to talk about things that are currently issues. So this year we decided to invite the Black and Indigenous Working Group to talk about what they have been involved in thus far and what's coming up. And also Laura Secord and Queen Victoria Annex have anti-racism group committees within their PACs that are quite active. And so we've invited them to present as well. And then after that, we can open the floor to people talking about what their questions are or concerns are or things they're doing. I also know that there are several other PACs that have active anti-racism committees. So if there are people here representing those, we'd be interested after the presentations in hearing from you. The Black and Indigenous Working Group is currently 5 people plus me taking notes. Alec Guerin, who welcomed us onto his territories, has joined us. Alicia Williams, who you heard from, she has a child in high school and a child in elementary school. Leona Brown, Christine Spencer, and also our elder is Sadie Keene, who I don't think is here currently. She may be popping in later. But Sadie was the first Black school trustee in Vancouver and has held a variety of positions, political positions over her career, and continues to advocate on behalf of all students and their families, but specifically noticing the inequities and looking for all students to have the chance at safety and success in the school board. So I'm going to call on Alicia and Alec, who will start us off.
Thanks, Karen. Hi, everyone. I'm not going to try to in any way emulate the land acknowledgement that was already done because it was amazing, but I am grateful to live, work, and play on the unceded and stolen territories of the Musqueams, Tsleil-Waututh, oh my goodness, I'm so sorry. Squamish, thank you, Squamish nations and people. So thank you for that. Just really quickly, I want to address something that Gord mentioned earlier, which is the Anti-Racism Non-Discrimination Working Group that is addressing the items that came out of the Stronger Together effort and survey. Yes, that group has met twice now. The second meeting was earlier today, and the progress is extremely slow. Of course, it is only the second meeting. There was a repetition of some of the things that happened in the first meeting. And the newest step that was taken was to look at the 6 themes that were presented in the report and to somewhat prioritize those themes. And coming out of that, and I think it's okay for me to share this, is you know, this one theme that people were most interested in us working on was a sense of belonging and participation. And then second to that was expression of identity, but we agreed that all of the themes were really equally important and needed to be addressed together. So again, that's as far as we've gotten. I'm hopeful that it'll start to make some progress. And the goal of that group is to come up with ideas for how we can really address those different topics. and, you know, hopefully make our schools a safer place where all of our children can learn and grow. So I'll continue to report back to the DPAC on that. I'm going to do a quick presentation, and then I'm going to let Alex speak about things that are very, to elaborate essentially on the work that our group has been doing, because he speaks so eloquently. So I want to be able to pass it over to him to do that. So let me just share my presentation quickly, and I'm just going to go through some of the things that our group has been working on, what essentially kind of our purpose has been, or what we feel our purpose and responsibilities are, and what we're hoping to accomplish. So for the Indigenous and Black Working Group, the responsibilities that we've identified for ourselves, we really want to be advocates for the mental, emotional, and physical well-being and cultural safety of students of Indigenous and African descent. We know that's a major issue for these students, and it greatly impacts their ability to perform within the schools. We want to be a source for providing recommendations on policies and procedures for the VSB, so that, you know, as they're talking about addressing systemic racism, which they seem to be placing some emphasis on, we really look at how we can do that. So that's, you know, talking about how we address discrepancies in educational resources and outcomes, differences in the application of discipline, establishing a conflict resolution process that is transparent, readily accessible, and easily understood by parents and caregivers. And some of you may know and have experienced that the conflict resolution process doesn't seem to exist, especially if you heard about the incident that happened at Lord Byng. And then establishing an annual review process where we really hold them accountable to what the work has been done on the elimination of racism and discriminatory policies within the schools. And then we also want to provide a forum for parents and caregivers of these students of Indigenous and African descent to come together and be able to speak to these issues and support each other so that we can better support our students. In terms of outcomes, we've identified a few things that we think are really important for there to be some positive changes in the schools. And part of that is the development of a curriculum that includes the contributions to Canadian culture, the protection of land, and contributions to infrastructure and industry. And that's for not only, you know, Indigenous people, but also for Black, Asian, immigrants, people, equity-seeking groups, right? We really want that to be something that is part of the curriculum, because it's important to tell people's stories, right? How do we come to really know and understand each other is through understanding that everyone has a different story to tell. And then we have similarities through those stories that we can relate to one another through. I highly recommend, if you haven't had a chance, please watch Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. She has a TED Talk on the importance of telling stories. It's one of the most watched TED Talks ever. And I think you'll get a real sense of why it's important for us to make sure that we provide this information to our students, that they see people who may or may not look like them in different situations that they may not normally think about. Then we also want to ensure that there is continued and ongoing training on anti-racism and non-discrimination. And I know that this is, you know, sometimes a little bit controversial when we talk about unconscious bias, but it does impact the way that we interact with each other. And I will say, very honestly, I have my own unconscious bias against against Black people. And I know that I have it for other groups as well. And I have to consciously see and recognize within myself that I am making those assumptions so that I can stop myself. And it's not easy. And some people don't try at all. And so that's one of the things that we really want to make sure that our teachers aren't doing to our students, is having that unconscious bias impact how they apply discipline, the opportunities that are provided to those students. And then we also want them to be able to help students talk to each other and learn from each other, and how to facilitate a conversation when there is something that happens, so that students learn that that's not the way that they should approach a situation. And that takes a lot of work, and it takes a lot of ongoing communication, and but that's one of the things that we really want to see happen. And then we want to see the development of an equity plan that recognizes that not all children start from the same place, because not all parents start from the same place. And there are some excellent examples out there of schools that do that. The Harlem Children's Zone does an amazing job of starting from birth all the way through to ensuring their students get into college. And it's really about that support. Yeah, maybe we can't do all of that in our public school systems, but let's think about how we can get closer to something like that. Having quantifiable measurements, and this is some of the things that I mentioned earlier, but really having the data to look at these things. So assessing what the difference in educational resources and outcomes are. And I'm going to talk about something really quickly here that's somewhat controversial, which is all of the programs that we have in the school district. And, even I know people, when we talk about the MAC program, but really, in these mini programs, how do we make sure that people really have access to these programs? It's really hard. My son, when he was applying for mini schools, it's an effort. It takes parent resources to help support their children to get through that process. And if you're a single mom who's working 2 jobs, you don't have the time to help your child to get through those, to have those opportunities. And so it's really about how can we ensure all students have the ability to access programs that can be so beneficial to their well-being. And here I'm going to just mention another resource, which is The Myth of Meritocracy. It was written by a professor. I think he's at, I don't know, Yale or Princeton or something like that. But it's interesting to hear him talk about the fact that people who have resources always do better, right? And if you start from a place where you don't have much, it's very difficult to do much better. And so how can we really help in those circumstances? And unfortunately, children of Indigenous and Black descent seem to disproportionately be in these positions. And so it is really about, how can we assess and make sure we're looking at the differences when it comes to educational resources and outcomes, discipline, conflict resolution, and how can we put resources in schools that really, if they help Indigenous and Black students, they're going to help all students. So this isn't just, how do we help one particular group? It's really about, in the end, helping everyone. And of course, we would love to see an increase of diversity in the teachers, staff, administrators, everywhere. And then lastly, we're very interested in developing a database of instances of hate-based violence and discrimination. And so there's been a lot of talk about that and how we might be able to do that. And I'll also just say that, we're one group and we are focused on the needs of Indigenous and Black students. Likely, DPAC needs to consider establishing other working groups for other communities that are equity seeking, LGBTQ2+, right? There's a number of other groups, immigrants, there's just a lot that requires focus. And so we are putting out the call to PACs in terms of, for us, we need to build our own capacity. So if you know of parents of Indigenous and Black or African descent who might be looking for a community, we really want them to come to us, and we want to support them, and we want to all work together to achieve these outcomes. Okay, and my last slide, and this is to really hand it off to Alex, and I debated whether to put this first, quite frankly, because it's so important, and it's something that we really need to keep in our minds at all times. But, you know, all of this that I've said, you know, is in keeping with the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedom, the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People, and BC's Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples Act. And of course, it needs to tie in, of course, to the BC School Act. So we cannot forget those things, and we must continue to work towards them. And what, you know, I would say I'm happy to engage in conversations and talk about concerns that people have. And please know, if you talk to me, it's a safe space. I will not judge you for anything that you may think on this topic. And with that, thank you. I apologize for my really poor land acknowledgement, and I would like to hand it off to Alec.
Thank you. And regardless of how you feel it went, thank you for acknowledging the territory of our peoples. I think it was a really good in-depth presentation, and I don't know that I have much to add from that regard. So I think I might just share my observation and experience in the time that we've been kind of collaborating together. I think that one, I'm super stoked to be a part of this group and a part of supporting this work. I'm not going to go too into detail on like my background stuff, but my grandmother was Gertrude Guerin. She was one of, I believe they were called PTAs back then, but she was the first Indigenous representative of a PTA in the region. She helped found the Aboriginal Friendship Center, and she helped found what is now known as the Native Education College on 6th and Main, which is actually where I finished my equivalency degree. I was a dropout of the mainstream system. My father was the education manager in Musqueam and a school liaison for a number of years, I think over a decade. I've got family members who work within VSB, and education is really important to me. So that's kind of why I'm here. I don't have any kids in the school. I don't have any kids, so I definitely don't have any kids in the school system. But you know, I have nieces and nephews and little cousins, and regardless of familial ties or not, like I just want to see Indigenous kids succeed. And so here we are. Really happy to be working with a number of really strong women in this area. But one thing that I've noticed is that, you know, Leona and I are the only Indigenous people kind of involved right now. And there are no Indigenous parents, I think definitely from Musqueam. But Leona, I don't know if you have ties to Squamish or Tsleil-Waututh, but no, yeah. So there's the three kind of nations who have a lot of kids that are within the school system, and there's very limited participation. And I think that is really telling to the type of engagement that we have with Indigenous kids, Indigenous parents, and with the three nations. So one thing that I've really seen is that while there's been a shifting in attitude towards wanting to do anti-racism work, I think there's this, and I'm guilty of this too, there's this kind of culture in colonial Vancouver of really wanting to appear like we're doing good and having that be more important than actually doing the good, which I think it's a very easy pitfall to fall into. And I don't judge anyone for that kind of slip up, but I think that in the school board, that's definitely the case. You know, we talk about anti-racism much more than we actively work in this. And I think that's because it's really uncomfortable work. It's uncomfortable to be a parent whose kid has less roadblocks and to have to wrestle with that. But it's also difficult, you know, from this side as well. You know, we've got a rope tied to the Titanic and we're trying to pull it away from the iceberg, you know, and it's a heavy ship. So I think the big observation is that I've had is that the attitude towards the work is changing and everything's moving in a positive direction, but I think we need to be a lot more active. And particularly from my perspective as an Indigenous person, the relationship that the school board and even the DPAC has with Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh could really be improved. And I think that the engagement opportunities are limited. In the work that we've done with the working group here, there have been a couple of initiatives that kind of we who are more closely connected to the DPAC and the school board, like we're hearing about it a bit late and seeing that the nations are also kind of being engaged at the 11th hour. I work in Musqueam, and I know that most of the things we're engaged on, it's like, oh, in the last 5 minutes, we realized we should probably get the Indian stamp of approval on this. And, you know, when there is just like a small office of us dealing with everything, it's impossible to respond in that tiny window. So yeah, I think there's a lot of engagement opportunities that fail because of the way that they're carried out in the timelines. And so I think a big shift that we could be seeing is engaging with Black and Indigenous people right from the outset on projects. And that means not just from the outset of implementing a project, but in the planning stages as well. I'm also seeing, and I kind of touched on this, it's very hard for, as I said, kind of in the welcoming, for an Indigenous kid to just step through the front door. It's kind of a huge undertaking. And I was a terrible student. I have to tell you, I acted out. I probably spoke too much in class. And kids were mean to me and I was mean to kids. And I think a big part of that was kind of being unsupported and having my identity unsupported. You know, like my ancestors, not, you know, in living memory, fought so hard to maintain our identity, but me as a person within the school system was having to put that aside. So there's this kind of mistrust, I think, because of historical and ongoing systemic racism for an Indigenous kid to get the help that they need. Not only is it the opportunities not being offered, you know, as they should be, but what little is available in terms of supports, they're inaccessible because there's a mistrust there. And it's not just the kids, right? I think it's really telling that Leona and I are the only Indigenous people involved because there's that mistrust that needs to be built back from. And that's not like, I'm not looking at Gord and saying, Gord, this is your fault. You know, it's not any person, it's the system. And it's been, as long as there's been a school board and a DPAC, the relationship's been bad and it needs to be bridged. And so instead of this being like a kind of a dour discussion where I'm saying it's bad, the way I'm looking at it is like, we all have an opportunity and you all have an opportunity to make some really positive change. And this is the perfect time to do so. Attitudes are changing. People are interested in anti-racism initiatives. There's a lot of kind of goodwill or buy-in from people right now that I think we should really be seizing upon. And I feel like in my limited experience working with the Black Indigenous Working Group, I think we could all be doing better on making the most of those opportunities within the school board and within DPAC. So I know that's a very different kind of thread of conversation than the presentation, but those are just kind of my immediate kind of observations in my time here. Yeah, so thanks for listening to my stream of my TED Talk. And I just want to say, like, I'm here to be a resource. I'm a young Indigenous person, but I have a lot of experience being in the school system, being failed by the school system, and I have a lot of connections that I can help make. So yeah, I think we are all here to be a resource, and yeah, utilize us.
Thanks so much, Alec and Alicia. There was one question from somebody that I think we could just bring into this because I think it could be answered at this point, and it was about why this is a Black and Indigenous working group and not a BIPOC working group. And I don't know if you want me to answer that or if you'd like to answer it, or if any of you would like to answer it. Alicia, I'm looking at you right now because you've been nodding, but I'm happy to answer it, or you can.
You probably can answer it better than I can,
Okay.
Karen.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think one of the, it's not a race to the bottom, right? We're not trying to say that, but we do have to recognize there are some things that Indigenous and Black people have experienced that have some similarities, and we see that they are oftentimes in similar stations in life at this point, and so I think there was a synergy there that doesn't necessarily exist with all people of color, and so that's one of the reasons why I did speak to there potentially being other equity seeking groups and working groups formed for those, because the immigrant experience is very different from the experience of Indigenous and Black people. And feel free to follow that up, Karen.
Okay. The reason why I offered to speak to it is because it's actually when we looked to do this work last year as DPAC, I brought in some academic understanding of what we are being asked to do by Black and Indigenous activists, which is to center people who historically have been harmed. And again, it's not a race to the bottom, but we don't have to argue over whether or not there has been terrible injustices that we are still trying to pull out of as a society and as communities. And so the theory into practice is that you center Black and Indigenous people and you create a space where they can speak with each other and not necessarily with any of us in the room, and develop relationships or continue relationships, but also get a strong footing. And the theory is that if you center the people most harmed, they will by the very nature of being harmed, they will look to seek equity for everyone, that we all benefit from making sure that we lift the people who we have stepped on, if you will. And I'm speaking from my own ancestral history until now. And so for year one of what we're doing, we chose to start by centering Black and Indigenous parents and community members, parents, caregivers, community members, and hear from them first and allow them to talk about what they felt needed to be addressed. And in one of our last meetings, we talked about Nora, we talked about the things that you've been talking about the importance of immigrants being excluded from PACs, and how we could do this work. And one of the conclusions that we came to in the discussions, and any of you feel free to interrupt me, is that the possibility that whether we talked about whether or not a committee at the DPAC level would be something that would be effective. And what we came to, one of the ideas we came across was that if different groups had a home at DPAC where they could get together and talk about what affects them, then a coalition in future, part of where our executive could come from is a coalition of people from those different groups. That they would be a good way to create inclusivity by making a home first and by earning trust first. And so that was kind of where we have most recently left off. And this hasn't been discussed within the DPAC executive. It hasn't been discussed anywhere else, but there's some good logic to it that we want to talk about going forward. And that includes, parents and community members whose children are diverse, are neurodiverse. There are lots of groups that need to get together and talk about things. And sometimes it's going to be, sometimes a person who is from an equity seeking group doesn't necessarily want to do that work. Their concerns are over here with their kid who's neurodiverse, right? And so the idea would be that that we build upon this model and widen the circle.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's great. It's great work that you're doing, Alicia, and everybody else who's on the panel. That was a very, very comprehensive rundown of what you're doing. I recognize that there are specific and very dire consequences that happen to some groups that don't necessarily happen to others. What I've been doing this year is, because I'm not Black or Indigenous, I still feel like I need to do something. So what I've been doing is I've sort of been taking this Holocaust view of things. And now, under the Holocaust, under the Nazis, they didn't just go after the Jews. They also went after, people who were mentally and physically handicapped. They went after people who are Catholic. There's this famous poem that if you don't stand up for someone, eventually they'll come after you, right? So I've been trying to think about this big picture idea, and because actually at our school, because we're privileged to be on the West Side, there are not so many Indigenous or Black families, and so children may not have daily contact with these people and be able to learn from them. And so I was thinking, just in terms of, I've been trying to talk to the teachers about the common denominator of everything, all the people that the Nazis went after and why it happened. And it's just this thing of othering, right? To think that somebody in like my group is better than your group. And that happens in my, like that happened like really badly in my PAC. It's a dual track school, and even though it wasn't like the PAC wasn't intentionally being racist, it was the idea that my French immersion group is better, counts more than your group, and therefore, as a consequence of that, the people who were the minority, they really got marginalized in a way that actually fit inside fit in the definition for textbook racism, in terms of one group has the institutional power to and working on sort of stereotypes is able to further advantages for their group to the exclusion of others, right? And this is something really very hard to talk about, like within my own PAC, but yeah, I mean, so my point is that what I'm talking to the teachers about is really focusing on this idea of othering, to teach kids from, you know, kindergarten not to other people, right? To try to be welcoming, to try not to close into cliques, because if you get into a clique, you become very ethnocentric, closed-minded. So they're not actually, these ideas do not actually pertain to any particular group, but I think it's helpful for all. And so these particular things, the other thing that I was thinking of, and maybe this is something that the DPAC could advance, is this idea of Remembrance Day. And this ties into this Holocaust Remembrance Day. Like, you know, we always say lest we forget, but what are we forgetting, or what lesson was really, what lessons was really learned out of World War II? The lesson that was learned out of World War II is we can't have these racial hierarchies where the British feel that they're better than everyone else, the Nazis feel they're better than everyone else. What we need is racial equality, right? That's what we should be remembering from Remembrance Day. But I think, as Gord said, because of the fact that people who've gone through the Holocaust are dying off, people have just totally forgotten this. So, you know, that's what I'm more interested in, the high level things, the things that the kids can do themselves, because we're talking about creating a welcoming community. It can't just be the teachers. It's got to be internalized by the children from a very early age. So these are things this is the kind of thing that I'm interested in, and maybe we can create a committee about that.
Thanks, Nora.
Yeah.
Thank you. So I think we will move on right away to, oh, I'm sorry. Leona has something that she'd like to share with us. Leona.
Just briefly, I'm not going to go on too much. I just wanted to kind of touch on the representation of Indigenous people. And I think we as a community, and especially the non-Indigenous people, need to have an understanding of where we come from as Indigenous people, what we went through. And Alec kind of touched on it a bit about our histories, and, you know, us being, we are new to this society, you know, Canada being implemented, what, 150 years ago or something like that. And we are very new to this society. But how did we get here? We got here through trauma. We got here through genocide. We got here by our heritage and our culture ripped from us. And all of that trauma is still with us, still with me. You know, if I didn't learn about truth and reconciliation, I'd still be sitting here wondering why am I depressed? Why do I feel this way? Why do I feel scared? There's this innate genetical thing that we believe that we carry through the generations, through our genes, our trauma, our fear, our truth, our love, everything. We carry it through our genes. And there has to be an understanding through the systems that this is how we learn. We learn verbally, we learn through touching things, we learn through visual things, and we learn by automatically feeling the empathy from some other person that we can feel free to talk to and be able to talk our truths with. We've gone through a system that didn't allow us to do that at all. We've gone through a system of residential schools where we are beaten, and look at Williams Lake. I give my heart to all of that. And you know, it's hurtful to hear these kids being murdered and buried. And then we sit here and we wonder why our Indigenous people aren't going to the PACs. They're not going to these meetings. Why? Because we're afraid. Maybe we've tried once or twice, and I speak of lived experience. You know, I tried to resolve something in the school and I'm ignored or pushed aside, or they're just children, and there's no justice for us with the schools, with the ministry, with the police. And eventually a high percentage of us just sit back and we're just like, no, why go to a PAC meeting? Nothing's going to change for me there. I'm not going to change nothing. What's the point? I'm not going to be heard. or you feel, you know, you walk into a space where there's a lot of white people and you're just like, okay, I don't want to share my story. Like, it's not a safe place. So these are the types of things we're dealing with. And I've been advocating for Indigenous parents, like through the Raycam area, the East Side, to, you know, when I hear about troubles with their kids in schools and everything, I ask them to go to the PAC. That's where you start making changes. Start going to those meetings and have your say, right? But it's an overwhelming fear from our Indigenous people. That's why the lack of representation. It's just, you have to have that understanding and that empathy. And when you see another Indigenous person, you know, try to encourage them. You know, there's a space where we can come and talk. Indigenous DPAC is one of them. That's just what I wanted to say.
OCM.
Thank you, Leona. I want to thank all five of you, including my brain is losing it too, Alicia.
Sadie.
Including Sadie, for the work that you've done all year this year, and for where we are in the process compared to last year. I think it's big. I think that the work that has been done and what you all have done is big. Christine.
Thank you, Alicia and Alec and Leona. That was great for sharing. I did want to say, after Leona's impassioned words, I was hoping this was be an appropriate part before we forget. I would like to make the ask of the DPAC to please publicly state, I'm not sure if this would be a motion, or Karen, you know what I'm going to say, about to publicly state that we are here, yeah, and that there's an open invitation to connect with the Black and Indigenous group for Black and Indigenous parents. So I just didn't want that to go.
Okay, I will do that work this week. Kyla.
Thank you all so much for your work. I wonder if we could have that distributed to each of the PACs as an invitation, because then again, people who might be attending their own schools PACs but not DPACs wouldn't necessarily know. We could distribute it out that way and get it into the school newsletters as well. And then I don't know if this is possible. Maybe one of the DPAC execs can say, but is there a time when the DPAC could ask that this group be given a chance to report out as a stakeholder at a VSB meeting, so that the trustees can hear about this excellent work and can hear it from the people doing the work, not to discredit the folks who go to the VSB meetings at all, but it would be great for it to be a direct representation.
Thanks, Gord. I'm going to ask you to respond to that one.
Yeah. So, I mean, for me, I think I think that, I mean, one of the focuses for this board's work continues to be anti-racism work. It's slow, and you know, right now they're dealing with the Urban Matters report. So I can see, I mean, I'm just thinking, I think we can absolutely look for opportunities to hear to try to put that group directly in front of trustees. We are making, I mean, there's a couple of other places where we're saying, you know, this isn't an official committee of ours, right? I mean, there's no reporting structure. We're just making space, but we are, you know, making space, and you know, and trying to help gather people so that they can talk and form a strategy, right? I think, and we have said to trustees, you know, if you're looking for a group of people to talk to, here, like, you know, we've been we want to give them you shouldn't hear from us. You shouldn't hear from Gord, right? I mean, Gord's not the right person. Gord or Karen, I mean, we're kind of aware of what's going on, but there's been more than a couple of cases where we've said to senior staff, oh, you're looking for somebody to engage with, talk to these parents, right? And we've said the same with trustees. I will think about how we would do it in a more formal setting to get, somewhere in front of all trustees. But I would say that as much as possible, again, we're trying to connect parents with the right people. And I'm looking back to Karen.
We also, before Christmas, the group met with staff that's involved in or in charge of anti-racism work. So there was an introduction there, and there was an introduction with a couple of trustees, and others weren't available before Christmas. So that work continues in that sense, I think would be the answer to your question, Kyla. And then we do look to the group itself for leadership, like for guidance on where they want to go, what we need to put in place for them, or what our asks need to be on their behalf if they choose to go through us. But both have happened. Actually, Alicia, I know we were talking about the letter that you wrote in the summertime that the group wrote. So there have been two direct letters from the group to the staff and trustees, I think.
I know there was at least one that we wrote about the Urban Matters report and some concerns that we had about how that was approached, and of course the need to build trust in the community. And then we did draft one for the superintendent search, because that was also supposed to include people from the three bands, right? And so I think, and we aren't aware that necessarily happened. And so we wanted to just reinforce the fact that superintendent needed to have diversity, equity, inclusion mindset. And so, some of the things that I touched upon are things that we're still going to be pushing for, and came from some of the letters, those two letters.
Vic, and then we're going to move on to the presentation of the PACs. But Vic, first, you made it home.
Oh, thank you. So I just wrote down a note here for officers for February 4th SMT meeting. Mentioned to our new superintendent that we mentioned to our previous superintendent that lots and lots of parent talent exists. Please use it. So we've mentioned this before, and this is a response to Kyla in addition to what Gord said. We mentioned this before to the VSB, to the trustees, to the staff, repeatedly, that there's lots and lots of parent talent. Please use it. So that's kind of really what I wanted to mention, is that we are on this. We are going to mention it again officially at our staff meeting with the VSB, and we hope that one day they use it. And if they call out for advisory groups, we're going to get more parents involved than what DPAC has at its reach and its limit of reaching out to parents. We do a good job, but by no means the VSB can reach out to everybody and say, hey, we got these advisory groups. Would you like to give us feedback? And parents will say yes. So I think there's a lot more emphasis that needs to keep going on to that theme. And this goes to just a very small acknowledgement when Alex spoke about consultation and how it's being done at the 11th hour. Like, people know that type of consultation is not genuine. And that has a very profound impact on me and on the kind of society that we want. Is we want consultation to be genuine. So we also have to strive for that. Thank you.
Thanks, Vic. So I want to introduce Shahira. Where are you, Shahira? And Shahira is going to introduce the people from Laura Secord and from Queen Victoria Annex, and is also going to she has an introduction.
So I'm going to introduce the folks first. Hi, everyone. I'm Shahira. That's Mackenzie. And we're from Laura Secord. And I have here Nicole Spencer, who is our anti-racism representative. Nicole. And then also
Hi.
Erin Peters. Erin, who is I believe it's the anti-racism and diversity inclusion rep at Queen Vic Annex. Is that right, Erin?
Anti-racism, equity, and inclusion.
There you are.
Okay, thank you. And we are here this evening on Karen's kind invitation, and also to I guess contribute to the work that the Black and Indigenous Working Group is doing, and showing how our PACs are kind of supporting that. So we're two different schools. We're Laura Secord and we're Queen Vic. And Queen Vic is our annex. So we've had this relationship with, which like about 4 or 5 years ago, we were like, oh, we have an annex. So then we started working together and like going to each other's like PAC meetings and cross-pollinating. And because of events during pandemic, I feel like we've really gelled through the work of our anti-racism committee. And so I'm going to hand it off to you, Erin, if you want to talk about that.
This is unexpected. I said I don't need to say anything. I don't know. I mean, I think you've highlighted it. We've done a few workshops. We've done a couple workshops last year together, and we're going to do one again in a month that Laura Secord has organized. And yeah, just sharing lots of resources and ideas for events and things like that. So it's been really, really valuable.
Can you tell us about your school communities? Sorry.
No, that's okay. Nicole, do you want to talk about the anti-racism committee and the work we're doing and how that's contributing to the school community?
Do you have the slide? I thought the slide, we're going to have a slide up, or we're not doing that? It's okay. We don't need to, but I thought, oh, you're muted. It's okay. I can just talk. First, I just want to share, yeah, my name is Nicole Spencer, and my pronouns are she, her, and I just want to recognize that I'm so grateful that I am connecting with you this evening from the unceded, ancestral, and occupied homelands of the Lillooet and Squamish First Nation, and I am a white settler of Czech, Irish, Scottish, and English ancestry, and I recognize the privileges and responsibilities that I hold to respect the land, water, air, and relationships to support Indigenous sovereignty and decolonization. And yeah, so what I was going to share, so I guess some history of the ARC at Laura Secord and kind of what we're doing now. So it came out of after George Floyd's murder. A group of parents got together to start the ARC, recognizing that there was important work to be done to advance anti-racism and decolonization in the classroom and in homes and in community. And one thing that happened last school year was a survey was developed to try and understand what are families, parents, and caregivers' connections to anti-racism, and what do they see as important in the school. And what came out of that quite strongly was there was an interest in there being more in the classroom, which makes sense, and also that they wanted information shared. And I think, as Erin mentioned, there was a workshop that was delivered last year, and it filled up, and then more people wanted to attend, and which is great. So yeah, we've added additional capacity this year for that. Yeah, but so what after that survey came out, what we, one thing I also want to mention, just in terms of what we're doing, sometimes we're sort of highlighting certain topics or certain times of the year, but I think one thing we're also trying to recognize is that every day is a good day to learn, unlearn, and take action to elevate and amplify marginalized voices, to dismantle racism and support decolonization. That we don't want it to be like a, just this one day of the year. But so we do have monthly newsletters that we send out, and monthly e-gatherings with people who are on the ARC, and Erin started joining us too, which has been great. Connections with staff for sure. One example is the Moose Hide campaign. If you're not familiar with it, it's a campaign designed to raise awareness about violence against Indigenous women, girls, and gender diverse folks, Two-Spirit and others. The school has registered, and teachers will be connecting on this topic in various ways in their classroom. And I can get the link after and share it too, because we're hoping to, the day is May 12th, it's been delayed. But yeah, we're hoping to also spread more of the word in the parent and caregiver community, as well as in the work that's going to be done in the schools. So it's just one example of connection with staff. I also wanted to mention that we've also been doing some in-person connections, and I think those have really been really powerful. There's nothing, I think, more powerful than being in person and being able to share and talk, and to point earlier about storytelling. I think that's part of it. You can really share and make those connections. So with COVID precautions in place, some of the topics have included like Orange Shirt Day, in connection to Orange Shirt Day, National Day for Truth and Reconciliation, the Amnesty International Right for Rights, as well as recognizing year-round days of significance and sacred times. And hopefully we'll have a connection around Black History Month in that way, aiming to elevate and amplify local Black history and resilience, but we'll see about that with the COVID context. And what else, anything else I wanted to mention? Just to Alex's point about how little we've been able to involve Indigenous families, that there has been discussion about creating a group. The idea was Indigenous, Black, and people of color. I recognize what you're sharing earlier around it. But anyways, that's been in discussion, but hasn't come to fruition yet. And I'm really grateful to hear there's opportunities perhaps for people to connect on a district level. And I think that's everything. Sorry, that was kind of rambly. Is there anything, Shahira, did you want to add anything, or Erin to? Oh, there's a slide. Sorry. Oh, I didn't know it was there. Oh, there you go. Yeah. I'll share. I'll find those links.
We can get the links after.
Okay. That was great, Nicole. Thank you. Erin, I don't know if you want to add to that.
To be honest, I'm not super prepared to say anything, but if people had questions, like people are asking questions in the chat, I'm happy to answer any questions around. If you need more specifics, I can answer questions, but I don't really know. It'd probably be more helpful to know what people actually want to know about.
For sure, right? I'm like, what do I even say? I feel like it's rambling all over the place, right? Like it just needs to be persistent, right? And it's everything, and it's everywhere, and it's all the time. So
I think that you've pointed out a few things. People are asking about specific people you've had in to talk, or what the events might have been. And so I think people are curious what it means. Anti-racism is all of the time and every day in a sense, but also bringing people into having the discussions, whether they're, as Alicia brought up at the beginning, all of us carry prejudices, and that includes internalized prejudices, right? And as someone who's neurodiverse and had to assimilate to a culture, a very, very narrow culture as a child, I definitely have struggled with my own, internalized issues around that. So it's not like it becomes this us against them thing until we learn how to not do the things we do, right? And I think that that's what an anti-racism group in part at a PAC can do, is just like in a relationship kind of way where we have relationships with each other. people can learn things by being there, whether they're quiet or they're loud, they can learn, right? And they might learn, like I have in the past, that I talked too much and I wasn't really making space for others. And that was a really important learning lesson that I had to then practice. And so I needed community to practice with and to get it wrong, and for people to care enough about me to let me know when I was getting it wrong, but also to recover and to practice something better, right? So, the idea that we could do that at the PAC level, because hopefully we care about each other, and demonstrate to others the care model. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I'm just seeing a couple questions here. So I'm not going to answer the question about the newsletter, because at QVA we don't put out a newsletter. We more do send out like email, like we have a Google group for all of the parents and caregivers who chose to be on it, which I think is most of the school. And it's a really small school. It's probably only like 100 kids, and some of those are siblings. So it's pretty small. And what we've done is we've sent out, like last year, every single month, I would say we would send out like 3 or 4 resources pertaining to anti-racism, and invite folks to come and chat about anything that they had read or learned at the next meeting. We did that last year. This year we're doing like specific like table, setting up a resource table outside the school. So we did that for National Day of Truth and Reconciliation, where we had just like all books and resources and things on that theme, and just some presents, just if anybody wanted to come and chat about it. And we also send all of these resources to the teachers in the hopes that they'll do something with them. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. And then I think Gord had a question about what like the makeup is of our community. Our little school is very white, and so having to be super conscientious about the work that we're doing, and always recognizing that, what does that mean? What is white privilege? What is white supremacy? So sending out resources and things about that is important piece. And we're doing like a Black History Month resource table coming up in February. So we just do things like that at this point. I can't remember anything else. You want to go?
I shared the draft of the one that's coming up. Sorry, Shihir, I hope it's okay I did that, but I figure why not. Yeah, and I mean, I think the challenge that we've found facing the newsletter is that we want to try and connect from the heart, and we don't want to like tokenize, and we're not going to be able to cover everything, if that makes sense. And so I just find it's really tricky to not just be an info dump, but at the same time, people want resources, and I don't know, I find it challenging. I'd love if anyone has ideas how we can maybe, but I think it's a collaboration. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, one of the hardest challenges is the fact that COVID is a thing, and like we can't get into the school to do much, or like create spaces where we can have dialogue and conversation about.
That's the richest, right? I mean, that just is. And the times we've had those tables, and Aaron, I was going to say, I was going to bring up to our that I think we should try for February anyway, even though COVID is the way. I mean, I think we can still, it's just, we have to, and it's just, yeah. Shahira's got some great points here in the chat.
I just remember one other thing that we did at the end of last year was we just sort of organized the kids at the last minute in the classroom or actually not even in the classroom. We just wrote a message to all the parents saying if you can get any of your kids to write some letters to Justin Trudeau about okay, now I'm the worst. I'm blanking. I think it was about ensuring clean water on all Indigenous reserves in Canada. Just trying to amplify that situation. Yeah. So then we just compiled all these letters and had a parent send them.
Right. Oh yeah, we had some letter opportunity too. I'd love that you had them compile it and send it. We just had some different. We brought like the Spirit Bearers, Truth and Reconciliation calls to action, and talked about how we pick one. There's video they could watch, and just pick one to sort of send letters, but we had some templates too and ideas around the water, and there was something connected to, or sorry, clean water, and there was one connected to I think the Catholic Church and the apology, and there were some different ones.
So I released the spotlight on the two of you so that we could see more people that might have questions or want to talk about things. But first, Shahira at her last PAC meeting opened it up with, as I think it was the first PAC meeting of the year, and she opened it up with some slides, and I asked her actually to share them because I think that every PAC meeting can be an anti-racism PAC meeting if you bring your thoughtfulness into it. So I had asked Shahira to share it. So Shahira, I'm now putting you on the spot.
Okay, hi. Earlier when I shared my screen, did that work?
Yes.
Okay,
Do
so
it again.
I will do that again, but before I do, I'm going to ask you all if you can to light a candle. I had asked this before. And then 2, if you can get a noisemaker, so like a cup and a pen, or like a jar and a pencil. And, aside from how 2021 was what it was, 2021, and I'm sure in some ways we are all exhausted from it and also glad that it's over. But to just take a moment and reflect on not only all that we have been through individually, collectively, and also globally, but all that we have lost. And so that is the springboard into what we had done at our PAC meeting.
Shahira, did you want me to share the slide? Oh no, you got it.
Can you all hear me okay? Yeah, so we acknowledge our privilege to live, work, and play within the ancestral, traditional, and shared territories of the Musqueam and Squamish and the Tsleil-Waututh nations. And I also, in regards to what I've learned, I wanted to really thank Alec Guerin for welcoming us all here to these territories. Not everybody can do a welcoming except for folks from the traditional nations, but we can all learn how we can do our part in acknowledging the lands that we have decided to call our homes and where we raise our families. So I wanted to put out gratitude for being able to call these beautiful lands my home and raise my family here. And with that gratitude also, I wanted to thank the work of the Black and Indigenous Working Group for all the work that you do in this community. It's a lot, and it's important, and it inspires ripples into all the work that we are doing. And thank you again for this opportunity to share the community building of Laura Secord and Queen Vic Annex with the DPAC. Huge thanks to the work of Sadie Kuhn, Christine Jackson, Leona Brown, Alec Guerin, Alicia Williams-Young, and also our wonderful Karen Sang, who is the infamous and forever herder of us cats. And again, thank you, Erin and Nicole, for your ongoing work with our schools. So around all that we have lost this last year, we wanted to highlight the work, or I wanted to highlight the work of some amazing people that have passed on. And I think one of the reasons why Karen invited us to this gathering is because it happened to highlight the work of Black and Indigenous people. So I wanted, through the legends that have moved on to their next adventure, let us not forget their starlight. And in regards to how we are all here, I believe at our peak, there was 41 of us. In the words of Bell Hooks, rarely, if ever, are any of us healed in isolation. Healing is an act of communion. And I think in all of us making our efforts to participate in these groups, whether it's within our PAC or within the DPAC or within the subgroups that we participate in, we're all maybe subconsciously or intentionally working towards some goal of healing. And then we wanted, again, we lost some major folks this last year. And so Mr. Sidney Poitier, he was here with us from 1927 until 2022. And this is one of his quotes: living consciously involves being genuine. It involves listening and responding to others honestly and openly, and it involves being in the moment. And so I wanted to open this up a bit. Aside from him being known as the first Black man to win an Oscar in 1964, how has this amazing man's work touched other people in this group? Anybody?
I'll speak. So I think it's this, I'm going to go back to the story, right? He was so adamant about telling the story and demonstrating and showing Black people in a different light. For that, I'm grateful, because I think media plays a huge role in what we understand about each other.
Thank you, Alicia. I think anybody who saw him and his work could not help but be struck by his grace and his gentleness, but like fierce gentleness, right? It was not ambiguous where he was coming from. He was very clear. And I wanted to include this slide because aside from what he's known for in his Oscar work, he was huge in the civil rights movement at that time. Around the position that he was in, he provided a lot of financial support to the civil rights movement so that it can do and progress the way that it did. I'm sure lots of folks are familiar with. Yes. Yeah. So sorry, I don't mean to fade off there, but I'd like to acknowledge the ever graceful Sidney Poitier. And next is Desmond Tutu. He was with us from 1931 till 1921. And I love this quote from him, especially as an international religious leader. I would refuse to go to a homophobic heaven. No, I would say sorry. I mean, I would much rather go to the other place. And I think in many instances, we all would probably say that. We'd much rather go to the other place. And he was known, I think aside from his Nobel Peace Prize that he got in 1984 for his work around apartheid, to his beautiful relationship that him and the Dalai Lama had. And I think again, as an international leader, showing that like within his faith, to not be constrained by dogmatic religious ideologies, but really rooted in humanity, and how we all have the capacity for that, regardless of our religious affiliation or skin color or gender or sexual orientation. Does anybody want to add anything in regards to Desmond Tutu?
I can if nobody else wants to. I don't want to take up. I'll just quickly say that so my parents are from South Africa, and I grew up going there, and my dad used to read me Desmond Tutu speeches when I was a child. bedtime. And then just recently when he passed away, my cousin, who is a comedian in South Africa, had done some work with, because Desmond Tutu was quite funny as well. So they had done some work together. And so my cousin and my dad spent some time talking to my son about Desmond Tutu when he passed away recently, which is really special. So thank you for sharing that tonight.
Thank you for sharing that, Kyla. The next person I wanted to honor was Lee Miracle. She was with us from 1950 to 2021, and she was a very local, iconic, but also I think nationally iconic matriarch. She is one of the granddaughters to Chief Dan George. Yeah. And she has a couple of daughters that follow in her legacy. And Columba Bob is a very well-known playwright and artist. And around waterwork, I love this quote of hers that a local author and poet and teacher, Rita Wong, shares: the water owns itself. Yeah. And Lee Miracle talks a lot about the history of South Falls Creek and the different villages that were there. I thought she was just like so fierce. If you look at her book, I Am Woman, that she wrote, or that she self-published in 1988, the issues that she was talking about back then in the late 80s around violence against women, around Indigenous struggles, around equity and gender, like talk about contemporary, but there wasn't an audience for it then, or it was like very fringe. So it's heartening to see that the fringe is now becoming more mainstream and somewhat encroaching upon the status quo. But I love that she self-published her book. Because nobody else would publish it. And then she received the Order of Canada in 2018. So thank you, Lee, so much for your work.
Don't cry, Mom.
And then we also wanted to honor Chief Delgamuth, who is the Gitsan Hereditary Chief, also known as Earl Muldoon. And he was here from 1937 to 2022. I'm sure folks are very familiar with what's happening right now up in Wet'suwet'en, and Wet'suwet'en and Gitsan are very close allies and relatives, and through their work, they helped secure the landmark 97 case between Delgamuth versus British Columbia, which was handed down by the Supreme Court of Canada, and it granted the right to exclusive use and occupation of Gitsan and Wet'suwet'en land. And this decision was the first to acknowledge that title as inalienable and ancestral. And it's amazing that that decision was like 25 years ago, and BC and Canada still hasn't caught up to following their own Supreme Court ruling. But aside from how influential this case was here in BC, I believe lots of Indigenous communities from around the world come here to consult, to learn about like how can they replicate these kinds of court advances in their own countries as they fight for their land.
Tahira?
Yep.
I just want to make sure that we take a moment in case anybody had anything about Lee Miracle that they needed to share, and also about Chief Delgamuth.
Yes, thank you.
Of course.
I didn't know Lee Miracle was, I didn't know of her, I guess. So I'm going to take note about this book and read about what she speaks of. About the Delgamuch, it's in my territory, I'm Gitsan. And I've kind of heard about it when the court case happened, but I didn't have much knowledge about it. And it's something I'm also going to read more about. I did hear about it. And I give prayers of love and light to everybody who has passed through on this list and everybody who passed through the COVID years. And Delgamuch, that's how it's pronounced, Delgamuch. Like it's yeah, it's not a hard K, it's a kind of like it's a whisper kind of thing. Ugh. Delgamuch. It's, I'm honored to see it, like as a Gitsan person, I'm honored to see this on the list, even just in thank you, Hamia.
Thank you, Leona. Thank you, Karen. And then kind of reiterating what Alec had talked about in his welcoming here, we're coming back to bell hooks. And I loved this quote because I think how we shared this at a PAC meeting, this ties into the work that the administration does, that the faculty does, but then also that we are doing here, not only here as parents, but every day in our households, right? To teach in a manner that respects and cares for the souls of our students, of our children, is essential if we are to provide the necessary conditions where learning can most deeply and intimately begin. And bell hooks was with us from 1952 to 2021. And so how I had asked you all to grab a glass and a noisemaker, however you want to make noise, for these amazing spirits that have contributed so much. Yeah, please make your noise. And also, if you like, around maybe folks that you have lost this last year that you want to honor, please feel free to share them. Thank you for listening to this. And again, thank you for the invitation.
Thanks, Shahira and Nicole and Erin very much for just coming here as yourselves, bringing the information you have and sharing it. We will collect all the links that you have and we will put them at the bottom of the minutes from this meeting, and those will be available online. So I'm wondering if anyone has any last quick questions, and then I might hit up Alec for some final words if he has any. Or else I know I didn't ask you before, but what do you think?
Yeah, just tell me one.
Now.
Nasiya Nastli Kwan Skalet Siatala Neat Tie to Ayaktol Tenasnet Ike Tenashquelwan Kwan Swinem Quasquel Khamse Kwanzi Quatsnala. My friends and relatives, I want to once again raise my hands and thanks to you all for being here tonight. It really lifted up my heart to hear you sharing your words and perspectives. I want to thank you for being here with an open heart and an open mind. We're done our good discussion for tonight, and I hope to see you all again soon. Hai Tset Kasiem Nasiya Haichka.
OCM.